This next thought leader is a family-focused man that believes in a life of balance. Whether it's work and play, exercise and relaxation, or living on and off the grid. Growing up here in Indianapolis, Joe takes advantage of every opportunity to get out and explore the world's natural beauty. Please join me in welcoming Joe Laughlin as he shares his idea on how one minor conscious shift can have a lasting and powerful impact.
Let me tell you a story about an 8-year-old boy. This 8-year-old boy towered over all his classmates, rocked oversized baggy shirts because of his skinny frame, barely ever said a word, and spent every second possible playing outside. He'd run around with all his neighborhood friends inventing all sorts of new games. They would chase each other for hours. Those games didn't end until long after the sun went down, when his jeans were covered in grass stains and his socks were filled with holes. He'd go on adventures in the woods, a magical, enchanted place where his mind escaped from reality. A fallen tree was used as a balance beam over a 50-foot drop-off into the whitewater rapids. He'd sway from side to side, slowly moving across the tree. Although just a few inches off the ground in reality, he shook for dear life as he made it to safety. Not even rain could stop this little boy from getting outside. He'd throw on his swim trunks, dart out the back door, climb the stairs to the playground, and fly down the slide, skidding halfway across the yard. Maybe you've guessed this by now, or maybe the tall, lanky description was a dead giveaway, but that 8-year-old boy was me. Those childhood experiences built the nature-loving person I am today. Now, I'd like to tell another story about a different 8-year-old boy. Like me, this boy was tall, skinny, and shy. But rather than playing outside, he spent most of his time indoors. Pretty much every day after school, he'd hide out upstairs playing Xbox with all his friends. Adventures in the woods turned into navigating Minecraft on his iPad. And almost any rainy day was a good excuse to flip on Netflix and binge watch SpongeBob. That 8-year-old boy was my little brother, Danny, who's currently 16 years old and the youngest of my 8 siblings. For those of you trying to do the math in your heads, we're about 12 years apart. Whether you have a younger sibling, niece or nephew, or child of your own, I'm sure most of us notice this change. Kids today are spending more time indoors and in front of technology and less time outside. And even when they are outside, they're probably still looking at a screen. During my discussion this morning, I'd like to touch on 3 things. First, our incoming workforce and their technology habits. Next, the effects of those habits. And finally, I want to touch on something that is critical to the success of our incoming workforce. So let's start with this new generation, Generation Z. A quick Google search told me that Generation Z begins with anyone born in the mid-1990s through 2010. An article I read told me that they're screen addicts, have short attention spans, and are lazy. My guess is a millennial probably wrote that article. This is the first generation to not know life without internet connectivity. iPads, iPhones, Netflix, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat. With access to so many different forms of technology, it's no wonder why they're stereotyped as screen addicts. Since the old Google search wasn't a whole lot of help to me, I decided to go directly to the source. My brother Danny. I know that he loves basketball, is a big Pacers fan, and wants to go to IU for business school. I watched him grow up and saw how different our childhood was. But after going off to college, I lost touch with his day-to-day life. So I asked him about it, and here's what he told me. The first thing he reaches for when he wakes up in the morning is his phone. Then he goes to school, where he has a laptop that's used in every class. little basketball after school, and then he jumps on that laptop to knock out his homework. After all his homework's done, he jumps on Xbox to play NBA 2K with all his friends. And almost any car ride in between those activities is spent on his phone. Nearly his entire day involves migrating from one screen to the other or juggling two at the same time. But it's not just Danny. Generation Z spends an average of 10 hours a day in front of a screen. 10 hours. Now, not all of that screen time is bad. I think we can all agree that the internet has made each of our lives easier in one way or another. Although Danny might grow up with his neck stuck in a permanent downward position, the truth is he's constantly absorbing all sorts of information. There are millions of questions I asked my parents as a kid. When I asked my mom, she gave me the old, "I don't know, ask your dad." And when I asked my dad, guess what he said? "I don't know, ask your mom." Danny doesn't even have to bother. He can actually sit there and fact-check whatever they say. He has the answers to all the world's most complex questions right in the palm of his hand. His biggest obstacle is dodging fake news. He'll never know the pain of searching a 10-story library for that one book he needs, or printing off MapQuest directions before a job interview, or carrying around an 80-pound backpack filled with bricks, also known as textbooks. The internet has truly advanced our society beyond belief. But life is all about balance. And call me crazy, but I don't think over 10 hours of screen time a day is a healthy amount. And science can back me up here. Check out some of these pictures. The first is a brain scan of someone reading a book. The red parts in the image show activity occurring in the brain. Now, the second scan shows someone searching the internet. Clearly, there's a little more activity here. I'll flip back and forth so you can really see the change. And this is a healthy amount of activity for the brain. But just like that glass of red wine at the end of a long day, neurologists tell us that it's only healthy in moderation. When we engage with our screens, our brains are in a constant state of use. If I asked one of you to pick up a 10-pound weight and do curls for 10 minutes, I think you'd probably do that. You might be a little tired by the end. But what if you had to do curls for 10 hours? Your arm would probably fall off. Just like any other part of our body and any other muscles, the brain requires rest to perform. And this is especially important for children overexposed to technology from day one. Our brains are developed more within the first 5 years of our lives than the rest of our lives combined. So when Generation Z puts their brains through this for 10 hours a day, during the most critical part of brain development, it's going to have some long-term impacts. Good or bad, better or best, future consequences of current activities, these are all areas that are impacted when the brain is overworked. The complex issues that we face every day are going to be more challenging for Generation Z to solve because their overworked brains will struggle to solve them. This really hits home for me because it directly affects Danny, my baby brother. As his older brother, it's my job to look out for him, have his back, maybe even provide some guidance. I don't want life to be any harder for him than it can already feel sometimes. I don't want him to lose skills that are going to be essential to his future success. And I sure as hell don't want him to make poor decisions. So being the natural helper that I am, I looked for a solution. And I found one. A solution that's all around us all the time. Something we all probably see but don't fully acknowledge. It's that one thing I lived for as an 8-year-old boy? Nature. Advancements in science and medical devices are opening our eyes to the power of being outdoors. Now, I'm no Bill Nye, but hear me out here because this stuff is super interesting. Take a look at these 3 brain scans I'm going to show. And think of this like a heat map. Red means high activity and blue means low. This first one shows brain activity occurring for a group of students during finals week. I mean, this literally makes my head hurt just looking at it. You don't need a PhD to see there is some serious activity going on here. This one shows brain activity for a normal week of students. Moderate amount of action going on here, but slightly refreshing after looking at that last one. Now, I've saved the best one for last. This scan shows brain activity after 3 days of camping and hiking, unplugged from all forms of technology. Little to no activity. The brain is truly at rest here. No phone calls, text messages, or Skype pings. Just the brain chilling out, taking some much-needed PTO. Listen, I've been camping and gone hiking and can stand up here and tell you all about how I felt after those experiences, but I think these pictures speak volumes. Nature gives us the opportunity to get outside, step away from all the chaos, and reconnect with ourselves. When in nature, we're engaging all 5 senses in a way that technology cannot imitate. You can smell the freshly blooming flowers flow through the air, or feel the warmth of the sun shining down on your neck, or hear the soft wind blowing through the air. Studies show that the more senses we involve, the easier it is to learn something new. Nature makes learning easier. It makes hospital patients heal quicker. Doctors are even beginning to prescribe it to patients with chronic illnesses like anxiety or depression. And the results are beginning to prove its once mysterious value. The American Institute for Research sampled 2 groups, one group that learned in nature and one group that learned in a normal classroom setting. The results showed that the group that learned in nature had a 27% increase in mastering science skills. Another research group sampled hospital patients recovering from gallbladder surgery. One group of patients had a view of trees outside their window. Another group had a view of a brick wall. Results showed that the patients with a natural view not only healed one day quicker, but also required less pain medication. And those doctors that are writing nature prescriptions saw that within just 15 minutes of their patients being outdoors, they had lower stress and heart rate levels with improved blood pressure. In just 15 minutes. For Generation Z, who has their whole lives ahead of them and so much left to learn, they can benefit the most from nature. But it's not just them. Maybe you could relate to some of the ways that I describe Generation Z. Maybe you reach for your phone too often, occasionally binge watch Netflix, or find yourself lost in a friend's friend social media page. I've definitely been there. We can all make changes to bring nature back into our lives. And here's the best part of it all. It doesn't require 3 days of camping and hiking. Studies have shown that something as simple as a view of green space lowers stress and sharpens performance. All it takes is 5 minutes looking out a window. It's that simple. So before rushing off to your next meeting or migrating from task to task, switching away from your laptop to pick up your phone, stop. Pause. Step aside from your screen and look out a nearby window. Give your brain the rest it needs so that it's ready for whatever complex issues are thrown its way. At Crow, we emphasize the importance of a work-life balance. It's critical to retaining top-level talent. But I'd like to propose another balance, the technology-nature balance. As artificial intelligence and machine learning begin to reduce our need for monotonous, simple tasks, the need for critical analysis and in-depth studying becomes crucial, especially for our incoming Gen Z team members. So consider the types of people you want to work with. Do you want someone who's constantly drained and always distracted, migrating from screen to screen all day without ever looking up? Or do you want someone who's creative, strategic, energetic, ready and motivated to tackle complex issues every day? I think we all know that answer. And we can lead by example. So if you remember one thing from this talk, remember this. All it takes is 5 minutes of nature.